The airport terminal buzzed with the chaos of 1,000 lives colliding. But for Elena Harper, the world shrank to the woman standing 3 feet away. Sarah's blue eyes, soft yet fierce, held her like gravity, pulling her heart into a freefall no plane could match. Then came the rip, sharp, deliberate, like a knife through their dreams, and the first-class ticket in Elena's hand was nothing but confetti. It was a crisp autumn morning in Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, and Elena, 28, stood frozen at the gate for Flight 214 to San Francisco. Her short brown hair fell in messy waves, framing a face that usually radiated confidence but now burned with shock. She'd saved for months for this trip, a first-class ticket to celebrate her new job as a graphic designer in San Francisco, where she and Sarah planned to start a life together. Sarah, 30, stood beside her, her long blonde hair catching the sunlight streaming through the terminal's towering windows. They'd been together for 2 years, their love a quiet rebellion against a world that didn't always understand. But this was different. This was cruelty. The flight attendant, a woman in her 40s with a tight bun and a name tag reading Margaret, had torn the ticket without hesitation. "We don't serve your kind in first class," she'd said, her voice low but venomous, her eyes flicking to Sarah's hand resting lightly on Elena's arm. The words landed like a slap, and the terminal's noise faded into a dull roar as Elena's pulse pounded in her ears. Sarah's grip tightened, her fingers trembling but resolute. "Excuse me." Elena's voice was sharp, cutting through the hum of the crowd. Heads turned, travelers, gate agents, a man in a suit pausing mid-call. Margaret's lips curled into a smirk, as if she'd been waiting for this fight. "You heard me," she said. "This is a family airline. We have standards." She gestured to the shredded ticket on the counter, her manicured nails gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Elena felt the air leave her lungs, not from the loss of the ticket, but from the weight of those words, "You're kind." Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fire in her eyes. "That's discrimination. You can't do this." Her dress swayed slightly, a soft contrast to the steel in her tone. She was a teacher used to commanding a room, but this was no classroom. This was a battlefield. Margaret didn't flinch. "Take it up with management," she snapped, already turning to the next passenger. "Economy's that way." Elena's hands shook as she gathered the pieces of her ticket, her dream of a perfect trip crumbling with them. She'd imagined sipping champagne with Sarah at 30,000 feet, their hands intertwined as they toasted to a future where they could just be. Now the terminal felt like a cage, every stare a reminder that their love was still a target for some. But Elena wasn't one to back down. She'd grown up in a small Illinois town where whispers followed her like shadows, and she'd fought for every inch of her confidence. This wasn't just about a ticket, it was about them. "Elena, let's go," Sarah whispered, her voice urgent but soft. "We'll figure this out." But Elena's green eyes flashed with defiance. "No," she said, loud enough for Margaret to hear. "We're not going anywhere until this is fixed." She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen as she started recording. "Say it again," she challenged, aiming the camera at Margaret. "Tell the world why you tore up my ticket." Margaret's face paled but her jaw tightened. "Put that away," she hissed, stepping closer. The crowd was watching now, a mix of curiosity and discomfort rippling through the gate area. A young woman with a backpack clutched her boarding pass, her eyes wide. An older man muttered something under his breath. Elena didn't care. She held her ground, her voice steady. "You tore up my ticket because I'm with her," she said, nodding towards Sarah. "Say it." The standoff stretched on, the air thick with tension. Margaret's eyes darted to the gate agent, who was already on a walkie-talkie, calling for a supervisor. Sarah touched Elena's arm, a silent reminder to breathe. But Elena's heart was a drumbeat of rage and resolve. This wasn't just their fight anymore, it was bigger. She could feel it in the way the crowd shifted, in the way a few passengers pulled out their phones recording the scene. Something was breaking open, and Elena wasn't sure if it was her heart or the world around her. The supervisor arrived, a harried man in his 50s named Tom, his tie slightly askew. "What's going on here?" he demanded, glancing between Elena, Sarah, and Margaret. Elena didn't lower her phone. "Your employee just discriminated against us," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "She tore up my first-class ticket because we're together." She gestured to Sarah, whose hand was still clasped in hers, a quiet anchor in the storm. Tom's eyes widened and he turned to Margaret, who folded her arms defensively. They were causing a scene, she said, her tone clipped. I was maintaining order. But the lie was thin, and the crowd's murmurs grew louder. A woman in a business suit stepped forward, her voice sharp. I saw the whole thing. She tore up the ticket and said they didn't belong in first class. That's not order, that's prejudice. Elena's chest swelled with gratitude, but she kept her focus on Tom. We're not leaving until this is addressed, she said. And I'm posting this video online. Tom's face fell, and he motioned for Margaret to step aside. Let's take this to the office, he said, his voice low. But Elena shook her head. No. This happens here in front of everyone. Transparency matters. Sarah squeezed her hand, her eyes shining with pride and fear. They were in this together, but the stakes were climbing. Elena's phone was still recording, capturing every word, every glance. She didn't know it yet, but that video would spark a fire that no airline could ignore. The video hit the internet like a match to dry grass. By the time Elena and Sarah boarded the plane, reinstated in first class after Tom's flustered apologies, the clip had already racked up thousands of views on social media. Elena's voice, steady and fierce, echoed through X posts and news feeds. She tore up my ticket because I'm with her. The hashtag #FirstClassForAll was trending by noon. On the plane, Elena sat by the window, her hands still trembling from adrenaline. Sarah, in the seat beside her, reached over and laced their fingers together. You okay? She asked, her voice soft but weighted with worry. The first-class cabin was quiet, the other passengers stealing glances but saying nothing. Elena nodded, though her chest felt tight. I just didn't expect it to hurt this much, she admitted, her green eyes fixed on the clouds outside. It's not about the ticket. It's about us. Sarah leaned closer, her blonde hair brushing Elena's shoulder. I know, she whispered. But you stood up to her. That's who you are. Elena managed a small smile, but the weight of the morning lingered. She'd always been the fighter, the one who pushed back against the world's sharp edges. Sarah was her balance, the one who reminded her to breathe, to dream. Together they were unstoppable. But today, Elena felt the cracks in their armor. The flight attendant who replaced Margaret, a young man named Javier, was kind, offering them drinks with a genuine smile. I saw what happened, he said quietly, pouring Elena a glass of wine. You're brave. Not everyone would have done that. Elena thanked him, but her mind was elsewhere. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Notifications from friends, strangers, even a local news outlet asking for an interview. The world was watching, and Elena wasn't sure she was ready for it. By the time they landed in San Francisco, the video had gone viral. Elena's inbox was flooded with messages, support from strangers, outrage from allies, and a few hateful comments that stung more than she'd admit. Sarah, ever the optimist, scrolled through the supportive posts, reading them aloud as they waited for their luggage. Listen to this one, she said, her voice bright. You two are heroes. Love is love, and no one gets to tear that up. Elena laughed, but it was hollow. Heroes, huh? I just wanted to get on the plane. She pulled her suitcase off the belt, her movements mechanical. The reality was sinking in. This wasn't just about them anymore. People were sharing their own stories. Couples denied service, families judged. Lives marked by the same kind of cruelty Margaret had wielded. Elena felt a spark of purpose, but it was tangled with fear. What had they started? That night, in their small Airbnb overlooking the bay, Elena and Sarah sat on the balcony, the city's lights twinkling below. Sarah wrapped a blanket around them both, her warmth a quiet comfort. What do we do now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elena stared at the horizon, where the ocean met the sky. We keep going, she said. We don't let her win. The next morning, Elena woke to a call from a lawyer named Rachel, who'd seen the video and offered to represent them pro bono. What Margaret did was illegal, Rachel said, her voice crisp over the phone. The airline's liable for discrimination. We can sue and we should. Elena hesitated, glancing at Sarah, who was making coffee in the tiny kitchen. A lawsuit meant more attention, more exposure. But it also meant holding the airline accountable. Sarah set a mug in front of her, her blue eyes searching. "What do you think?" she asked. Elena took a deep breath. "I think we fight," she said. "Not just for us, but for everyone who's been told they don't belong." Sarah nodded, her smile fierce. "Then we fight together." Rachel wasted no time. By the end of the day, she drafted a formal complaint against the airline, citing federal anti-discrimination laws. The media frenzy grew, with news outlets picking up the story and running headlines like, "Lesbian couple humiliated at airport," and "Flight attendants' bigotry sparks outrage." Elena and Sarah's faces were everywhere, their love story dissected by strangers. It was overwhelming, but Elena felt a fire growing inside her. This wasn't just about a ticket, it was about dignity. The airline issued a statement, claiming Margaret's actions were not reflective of our values, and promising an investigation. But Elena wasn't satisfied. She and Sarah met with Rachel in a sleek downtown office, where the lawyer laid out their options: a settlement or a public trial. "A trial will be messy," Rachel warned. "They'll dig into your lives, try to spin this against you. But it could set a precedent." Elena looked at Sarah, whose hand was steady in hers. "Let's do it," Sarah said. "Let's make them listen." As they left the office, Elena's phone buzzed again. A message from Javier, the kind flight attendant. "You've got more support than you know," he wrote. "The crew's talking. People are angry." Elena showed the message to Sarah, and for the first time that day they both smiled. Maybe this fight was bigger than they'd imagined. The courtroom was a stark contrast to the airport's chaos. Polished wood, muted lighting, and a hush that felt like the calm before a storm. Elena sat beside Sarah, their hands clasped under the table, as Rachel argued their case against Sky High Airlines. The airline's lawyers, a team of sharp-suited men, painted Margaret as a rogue employee. But Elena knew better. This wasn't just one woman's prejudice, it was a system that let it happen. The trial began 3 months after the incident, in a San Francisco federal courthouse. Elena, now settled into her new job, wore a tailored blazer, her short hair tucked behind her ears. Sarah, in a simple dress, sat with her shoulders squared, her teacher's poise unwavering. The gallery was packed. Activists, reporters, and curious locals who'd followed the story online. The hashtag #FirstClassForAll had become a movement, with protests outside airline offices and petitions demanding change. Rachel's opening statement was a masterclass in controlled fury. "This case isn't just about a torn ticket," she said, her voice carrying through the room. "It's about a couple's right to exist without fear, to love without shame." Sky High Airlines allowed an employee to weaponize her bigotry, and they must answer for it. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair, nodded slightly, her expression unreadable. Margaret took the stand on the second day, her tight bun replaced by loose curls, as if softening her image could erase her words. "I was under pressure," she claimed, her voice trembling. "The gate was chaotic, and I made a mistake." Elena's jaw clenched. A mistake? She'd looked into Margaret's eyes that day and seen no regret, only contempt. Sarah squeezed her hand, a silent reminder to stay calm. The airline's lawyers tried to shift the narrative, questioning Elena and Sarah's behavior at the gate. "Were you being overly affectionate?" one asked, his tone dripping with insinuation. Elena's temper flared, but Rachel had coached her well. "We were holding hands," she said, her voice steady. "If that's too affectionate, then half the couples in that terminal were guilty." The gallery murmured, and the judge's gavel silenced them. The trial stretched over weeks, each day a grueling test of endurance. Elena and Sarah's lives were dissected. Their relationship, their pasts, even Elena's old social media posts from college. The airline's team tried to paint them as attention seekers, but the viral video spoke for itself. Clips played in court showed Margaret's smirk, her cutting words, and the crowd's growing unease. Public support poured in, with celebrities and activists amplifying the case online. One evening, after a particularly brutal day in court, Elena and Sarah walked along the Embarcadero, the bay's waves lapping at the shore. "Do you ever wish we'd just let it go?" Elena asked, her voice raw. Sarah stopped, turning to face her. "No," she said firmly. "Because every time we fight, we're telling someone else they can too." She pulled Elena into a hug, and for a moment the world felt small again. Just the two of them, unbreakable. The turning point came when Javier testified. The flight attendant, nervous but resolute, described a culture of unchecked bias at Sky High. "I've heard comments," he said, his voice steady. "Jokes about passengers, slurs behind closed doors. Margaret wasn't an outlier. She was just the one who got caught." The courtroom buzzed, and the airline's lawyers scrambled to object. Elena felt a surge of hope. This was bigger than their story now. Rachel called other witnesses, passengers from the gate, a former Sky High employee who'd faced similar discrimination. The evidence piled up, painting a picture of an airline that prioritized image over equality. Elena and Sarah became symbols, their faces on protest signs and news banners. But fame came at a cost. Hate mail arrived at their apartment, and Sarah's school received complaints from parents who didn't want a controversial teacher. Through it all, they held on to each other, their love a shield against the storm. As the trial neared its end, Rachel prepared them for the verdict. "It's not just about money," she said. "We're pushing for policy changes, mandatory training, accountability, protections for all passengers." Elena nodded, but her mind was on Sarah. This fight had tested them, but it had also shown her what they were made of. They weren't just surviving, they were changing the world. The verdict came on a rainy December morning, the courtroom packed to capacity. Elena's heart pounded as the judge read the decision. Sky High Airlines was found liable for discrimination, ordered to pay damages and implement sweeping policy changes. The gallery erupted in cheers, and Sarah pulled Elena into a tearful embrace. They'd won. Not just for themselves, but for everyone who'd ever felt unwelcome. The damages were substantial, but the real victory was the mandate. Mandatory anti-discrimination training for all Sky High employees, a revised code of conduct, and a public apology. Margaret was fired, her actions deemed indefensible. As Elena and Sarah left the courthouse, cameras flashed, and supporters chanted their names. Elena felt the weight of the moment, her hand tight in Sarah's. They'd started a ripple that was becoming a wave. The fallout was immediate. Other airlines, watching the case closely, began reviewing their own policies. First Class for All trended again, with stories of passengers demanding accountability. A major carrier announced a diversity initiative, citing Elena and Sarah's case as inspiration. Javier, now a vocal advocate, started a petition for industry-wide standards, gaining thousands of signatures overnight. Elena and Sarah were invited to speak at conferences, their story a beacon for change. But not everyone celebrated. Online, trolls attacked them, and Elena's workplace became a battleground of whispers and sideways glances. Sarah faced pressure at her school, where some parents still pushed back. One night, exhausted, Elena broke down in their apartment. "Is it worth it?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. Sarah knelt beside her, her voice steady. "You made the world see us," she said. "That's worth everything." They leaned on their community, friends, activists, even strangers who sent letters of support. Rachel became a friend, helping them navigate the media storm. They started a blog, sharing their journey and amplifying other voices. Elena's graphic design skills came to life in posters and campaigns, while Sarah's teaching background shone in workshops they led together. Their love, once a quiet rebellion, was now a public declaration. One spring evening, they attended a gala hosted by an LGBTQ+ advocacy group. Elena wore a sharp suit, Sarah a flowing gown, and they danced under a canopy of lights, the crowd cheering them on. A young woman approached them, her voice trembling. "I saw your video," she said. "It gave me the courage to come out to my family." Elena's eyes welled up, and Sarah hugged the woman tightly. This was why they'd fought. The airline industry began to shift. Sky High's new policies became a model, and other carriers followed suit, fearing similar lawsuits. Training programs emphasized inclusivity, and passenger rights were strengthened. Elena and Sarah's story was taught in diversity workshops, their names synonymous with resilience. But for them, the real victory was personal. They'd faced hate and come out stronger, their love a testament to what was possible. As summer approached, they planned a trip, a do-over of that fateful flight. This time they boarded first class without incident, the crew greeting them with warmth. Javier was there, now a trainer for Sky High's inclusivity program. "You changed everything," he told them, his smile wide. Elena laughed, squeezing Sarah's hand. We just wanted to fly. A year after the trial, Elena and Sarah stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, the wind carrying the scent of salt and freedom. They were engaged now, their rings glinting in the sunlight, a promise forged in the fire of their fight. The world had changed, not completely but enough to feel the difference. Their story had inspired a movement. Airlines across the U.S. adopted Margaret's rule. Not her bigotry, but the principle that no passenger should be judged for who they love. It was a nickname born from irony, a nod to the woman whose actions had sparked a revolution. Training manuals now included their case, and airports displayed posters promoting inclusivity. Elena and Sarah's faces were on some. Their smiles a reminder of what courage could do. They'd settled into their life in San Francisco, Elena thriving in her design career, Sarah teaching with renewed purpose. Their apartment was filled with mementos, letters from supporters, awards from advocacy groups, and a framed photo from the gala, capturing them mid-dance. But the real treasure was their bond, stronger for every challenge they'd faced. One evening they hosted a dinner for their closest allies, Rachel, Javier, and a few activists who'd become family. The table was crowded with laughter and stories, the air warm with love. Javier raised a glass, his eyes bright. "To Elena and Sarah," he said. "You turned a torn ticket into a ticket to change." Everyone cheered, and Elena felt Sarah's hand slip into hers, grounding her as always. Their fight wasn't over. There were still battles, new laws to push for, new voices to amplify. But they faced them together, their love a lighthouse in the storm. The world wasn't perfect, but it was better because they'd refused to stay silent. As they stood on that cliff, exchanging vows in a quiet ceremony, Elena looked into Sarah's eyes and saw their future. Not just a life together, but a legacy. Their story ended where it began, in an airport boarding a flight to Paris for their honeymoon. The crew greeted them with smiles, their first-class seats waiting. As the plane took off, Elena leaned her head on Sarah's shoulder, the world below fading into a blur of possibility. They'd fought for their place in it, and they'd won.